we did talk quite a bit recently on, I think, the last show about Cornel West's VP. And that's what we're going to spend a lot of today's show talking about as well before we get into some of the RFK stuff later. But yeah, as you guys remember, Cornel West announced Melina Abdullah as his vice presidential pick. She's Muslim. She's a Black Lives Matter activist. And a lot of people have been pretty critical that Cornel West basically seemed to pick someone that was cut from the same ideological cloth as he is. And, you know, a lot of people have been saying that, like, well, at least he didn't compromise his, morals or his values, his principles. Clearly, he's going with someone who agrees with him. But does this expand his reach in any way? Does it, kind of broaden the umbrella, so to speak, of potential supporters he needs to pick up if he's actually going to make a splash in this race? So, before we get into this breaking point segment, I thought that Ryan and Saagar had some really interesting comments to make about the whole situation. Do you have any more, reflections on this decision, Zach? What do you think Cornel was thinking? And do you think that ultimately it's going to help him or hurt him?
I don't think it's going to help him particularly, right? I don't think the name Melina Abdullah rings a lot of bells for people who are in the mainstream, political apparatus or even just regular voters, right? I mean, we followed this pretty closely. I wasn't familiar with her. A lot of the people that we've talked to weren't quite familiar with her. So you look into her work and you see, okay, she's a person who's very faith oriented, just like Dr. West, although, she's a person who is of the Muslim faith. She's, a Black Lives Matter activist. So in that sense, it makes sense, right? We talked a lot about when RFK was thinking about Jesse Ventura versus Aaron Rodgers versus, ultimately Nicole Shanahan, was that, from an outsider perspective, it makes sense to go with somebody who's, more heterodox of a thinker than you, somebody who's going to challenge you, somebody who's going to create like a foil within reason, to, force you to make stronger arguments, think outside your own box, whatever. But then on the other hand, the argument was made that, hey, that person's going to be a heartbeat away from the presidency. Why would I want somebody who's going to go in and undo everything, unravel everything I accomplished? If I'm unable to hold the office any longer. So I think that for sure from the second capacity, assuming, which would never happen under the current circumstances, that Dr. West was able to secure the presidency, then yeah, of course, she would probably govern in a way that's more closely aligned to Dr. West, he feels, than anybody else. However, why I would push back on that being a great rationale for this stage in Dr. West's political career is because he has no real chance at ever securing the White House, right? So at this point, it's about drumming up, name recognition. It's about getting across the threshold to 5%. It's about making as big of a splash, drumming up as much noise and support as you can to say, the people of America demand a ceasefire. The people of America demand reform. They demand reparations. They demand, justice before the law. They demand, whatever else that Dr. West would, put as an integral part of his campaign, which I would absolutely agree with. I think you also have to say, okay, well, I want to get my message out there to as many people as possible first. And that's where I think it becomes a compelling argument to pick somebody who's a little more diverse than you. And frankly, given the state of current politics and the fact that it is a circus, that it is a media spectacle, that you have to play ball if you want to win the game, you need to get somebody with probably greater household name recognition than you, that's also simultaneously not going to upstage you. Now, the benefit for Dr. Cornel West is he's a tremendously difficult man to upstage, right? He talks about how he's a jazz man, he's an orator, he's the kind of guy, that's going to go up onto a stump and he's going to speak, he's going to move you, right? He can carry the crowd in his palms. So who does he need with him? He needs somebody of large amounts of stature, but who is able to, kind of assuage any fears that, somebody would have of Cornel West. Now, I'm not talking about racially motivated fears like, oh, I'm afraid of having a radical Black man become my president. Those are the people that we're not necessarily trying to reach at this juncture either. The people who I think you would need to assuage the fear of, it's like, oh, is this a serious campaign? Oh, is this going to have the, dots on the I's and cross on the T's? You know what I mean? Is this a administration going to get off the ground? It's how's that going to happen if we can't get a campaign off the ground? So in my mind, I would have picked somebody who has more of a experience, at least in like big time electoral politics. It could have been somebody that lost, but somebody that has been through the meat grinder, somebody that's tried and tried and tried, maybe as a congressional candidate to run as a radical, but somebody who knows how the sausage is made, somebody who knows how to fundraise, somebody who knows how to phone bank, somebody who knows, how to make a big splash, that would have been my advice for Dr. West. And it would have had nothing to do with Melina Abdullah's politics, personality, or face.
Right, 100%. I totally echo your feelings, Zach. And I was really thinking, I've been thinking about it for a while. I've probably articulated this sort of opinion or criticism of the third party movement a few times on the podcast. But one of my least favorite things about this third party movement and their inability to actually make a splash is their consistent self-seriousness when it comes to decisions like this one, right? As you said, Zach, Cornel West, unfortunately, he's not going to be the president. And if he did actually have a chance of being the president, I think it would make a lot more sense to make a pick like this. But as it is, we all know that he won't be, in the same way that we know that Jill Stein won't be, in the same way that we know that, all of these kind of fringe third-party leftist candidates won't be president. So I really wish they really understood the assignment more, frankly, and that is to make a splash. Like, that's what it's about. If you're running as a third-party candidate, you're running as a protest candidate. Until we get actual election reform like ranked choice voting, unfortunately, that's where we're at right now. It's a protest vote. It's a protest candidacy. The point is to make a splash. The point is to make the media cover you so that you can air your grievances with the current political establishment, with the duopoly, with Joe Biden, whoever is in charge. And when you make these sort of picks that really, minimize your chance of actually getting that sort of splashy media coverage, I think it just sort of defeats the entire purpose of running third party. Like, at this point, you might as well just have participated in the Democratic primary or something and kind of followed their rules. But no, the point of being a protest candidate should be to actually, perform a rousing protest, speak to the righteous anger of the public and actually do something that will make headlines, and not just headlines of people digging up your running mate's old cringy tweets. No, you got to actually wield the power of the media and of attention and, use it as a cudgel to make your arguments with, to make your criticisms with. And I think that everything from, the advertising, like the commercials for third-party candidates, to VP picks like this, I think they just consistently make this point that the people engaged in the third party candidacies, they don't really, like I said, they don't really understand the assignment. They're very serious people, don't get me wrong. But yeah, they consistently miss opportunities that make me think they don't even really understand the nature of the quest that they're on in the first place. Not that that doesn't mean they don't have good intentions, as is the case, I believe, with Dr. Cornel West. Yep. Absolutely. I think that's spot on. Let's take a look at some of this breaking points coverage, because I thought this was surprisingly interesting. Not that all, BP videos aren't interesting, but I don't know. I wasn't expecting these sorts of details to come out in this particular conversation. Saagar spilling a little bit of tea on the subject of Dr. Cornel West, and then Ryan coming in here with a pretty interesting theory, actually, about why Dr. West is running his campaign in the way that he is, the, somewhat mystifying way that we've all, contemplated.
Mystifying is a great way to put it.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm interested in your opinion on what Ryan Grim sort of postulates here, Zach. I think he might be onto something, although I can't quite bring myself to agree with his theory. Either way, let's take a look here. There's some interesting, kind of speculation and discussion about Melina Abdullah before, Ryan Grim gets into his spiel. But yeah, let's take a look here.
Generally, I wouldn't call him like a race-first person. He definitely indulges in a lot of racial rhetoric, but has always at least tried to adopt that this is something that is downstream of classism. But, from a pure political lens, it's like, why would you give this gift to not only for media? We wouldn't be covering it otherwise. Otherwise it's like, who barely even cares? Is he even going to be on the ballot? But for this, it just, to me, seems like a profound political misjudgment. Maybe it's just what he believes. That's fine too, if you want to do that.
Cornel West has almost seemed, and I hope we can get him on the program.
By the way, we have tried. His campaign has been a pain in the ass. So if anybody who is listening, who is out there, Dr. West, we've invited you on the show more than a dozen times, and I have yet to receive a proper response.
Ooh,
yeah,
it feels
more than a dozen
relatable.
Times. Yeah. Dr. West definitely has the channels he likes to go on and those that he doesn't. But it is. I do think it's a little bit weird, and I'm not, in the business of critiquing what shows Dr. Cornel West goes on. Obviously, I don't give a shit. The people over at Breaking Points have a litany of guests and they obviously, create compelling programming regardless. But I do think it's a little bit interesting, and I'm interested if you have any like thoughts on this, Zach, like why someone like Dr. Cornel West would go on CNN or Fox News or basically any mainstream platform, but not a show like Breaking Points, given that Breaking Points does have a pretty good reach. And I don't think they would give him an unfair interview if he did stop by.
I can't say for sure. Somebody that's involved with Cornel West campaign doesn't like, Breaking Points. They don't want to respond. I don't know. It's like with anything when you're trying to book somebody. Like, so it's more shocking because I'm like, for us, we can't really offer him anything. So if he's like, well, fuck it, I don't want to go on this show, like that totally makes sense. But for a show like Breaking Points, like that's a large amount of people who want to learn about Dr. West, who could potentially be Dr. West voters. So that one is a little more surprising to me. Again, I think it's just a misjudgment and a missed opportunity. Another, political misstep, basically.
Yeah, it's kind of odd because I feel like he would, get a fair shake, definitely a more fair shake than he got on like the Jimmy Dore show where he elected to, spend his time. But again, it's not really any of my business where Dr. West spends his time or which platforms he goes on. Just sort of an interesting and, kind of spicy observation from Saagar there.
You don't have to apologize. The dude's running for president. We can say whatever the fuck we want about his political campaign. He's running for the highest office in the land. And that's the other thing that, chafes me a little bit. People will run for president and they'll be like, why are you mind your own fucking business? It's like, no, dude, you decided to run for president.
Yep.
You're up for scrutiny now. You're on the chopping block. I'm gonna rip you a fucking new one. Like, oh, the mayor is pissed off when he comes in and sees me and I've talked shit about him from the Vanguard. It's like, sorry, brother, it's a free fucking country and you work for me here. You know what I'm saying?
And get paid a lot more.
To tell you, Liami actually, she got quoted in The Cut today, and I thought it was brilliant what she said. They asked her about how the fact that she hates Eric Adams, and she was like, I don't hate Eric Adams personally. I hate what he stands for. And if he resigned from office tomorrow, you would never hear me say that man's name again, because I only give a shit about the fact that he's the mayor and he's making my work harder. He's making lives harder for the people of, the residents of New York, whatever. Right. And it's like, okay, you would never hear me talk about any of the fuckers that I talk about on this show ever again if they just stop, putting their nose in American politics and media.
Yep, that's exactly correct.
Feels like he has regretted the decision to run since he launched it, and has been my conspiracy theory, if I were to get it in his mind, is that he has been consistently trying to undermine his own campaign so as not to undermine Biden.
Interesting. Oh wow.
First, he launched with the People's Party, clearly without doing any research.
Abandoned that immediately.
As soon as he realized what he'd gotten into, he's like, whoa, what is this mess? Then he goes over to the Green Party. Apparently, he hadn't done much work with the Green Party because I could have told you that thing is a complete and total mess. And so he was like, whoa, the Green Party is extremely difficult to deal with. They're not going to just coordinate me. He didn't want to fight for the nomination.
Why should they coordinate him? They shouldn't coordinate anybody.
Sure, because they're a self-respecting party.
Yes, they're actually, by the way, on the ballot.
But then
this
I
is
think
where
he started to worry.
Have a regular person come in, because this is what Gavin and I were screaming at the top of our fucking lungs, and people were like, "You don't understand, Dr. West. You don't understand what he's trying to do. We have real volunteers for Dr." I'm like, I'm not doubting that there are real people who support Dr. West, probably in the ballpark 5,000 of you spread across all 50 states and the Virgin Islands, but that's not enough to become president, right? And then it's also not enough for you to organize your own fucking political party. It's not enough for you to leave a damn thing behind unless you're planning on pumping billions of your own fucking dollars in the race, which Cornel West doesn't fucking have, and neither do the 5,000 supporters he scraped together. That's why he started taking checks from a rich asshole with a Nazi memorabilia named Harlan Crow. If you want to remember that debacle, one of the litany of fucking miscalculations and foibles by the Dr. West campaign.
Yeah, but what do you make of this theory, Zach, that actually Cornel West is kind of terrified of being successful and kind of splitting the vote, taking some votes from Biden and then getting blamed for a Trump presidency? It kind of makes sense, just given Cornel West's previous statements about Biden still being the lesser of two evils. But I also just feel like he could drop out. If he actually felt that way, nothing is preventing him from just dropping out, which seems like the easier path if in fact you don't want to be successful. But what do you think?
I think that I don't know if I buy that actually. I like Ryan a lot. He's way smarter than me, so fuck if I know. But my guess is I guess let's give full weight to Ryan's argument really quick because I'm not trying to dismiss it. I think that it's fair that he could be falling for the same kind of symptoms, the same kind of distress and fears that Bernie Sanders, kind of came over with, right, during the end of his primary run against Joe Biden, and really looking at Donald Trump and having people constantly remind you that no, this guy is a real threat to democracy. And I think it's kind of like a devil on a shoulder, angel on the other. When it's like, okay, so the angel is telling you this man is enabling a genocide. Like, you have to do everything in your power to run against this. You have to, you can't do anything about this. This is the issue of our time. We don't get to decide what the issue of our time is. We only get to decide how we react to it. Were we a voice for justice and peace, as he likes to say, or were we not? Right? That's his decision to make. That is the, Jesus, the Black liberation theology side of Dr. West, right? But this is a man who's been through liberal academia, right? And of course, he did it flawlessly, and he was, incredibly successful at it. But that's, you are the swamp that you steep in, right? So as he's constantly exposed to those people, as he goes on CNN, as he's running through these channels, where you go when you are highly respected in academia, where you go when you have been rewarded because you are, a light, right? Like it's kind of like the double-edged sword. The more successful you get, the more you get surrounded by people who really, don't have the interest of the proletariat or of the, liberation aspects of your mind. So he has those people who are putting the fake pressure on his brain, saying, oh, if you do pull 5%, if you pull 8%, that would have gone to Joe Biden. It's your fault that we have Donald Trump. Say goodbye to getting those speaking fees that you've been relying on for the past fucking forever. And if Ryan is correct, I hate to be that guy, but we all know money talks in America. It's a capitalist society. The man knows the IRS a lot more money. Okay. I was worried about how much I owed the IRS this year. I only owed them like $180 because I'm poor. Right. But this man owed them millions of dollars somehow, because that was fucking crazy. Like, anyway, so long story short, if he is, trying to poo-poo his campaign, it's because he didn't think about this not lighting into like a new Bernie Sanders thing. And I think that's what we'd have to hone in on. If we're going to take Ryan's, hypothesis, I think my expansion would be that he imagined himself early on just catching lightning in a bottle and walking with the torch and, getting the Bernie Sanders band back together and riding off into the sunset, and the Green Party gives him the nominee. And now it's the Freedom and Justice Party. And we're, all 50 states, there's an army of people behind Dr. West. They're chanting his name, 24, 24. It's a rapid, wildfire success. I think that's what he probably envisions, right? I think that's what Nick Brana probably sold to him, right? And, Nick Brana, you think the used car salesman mixed with the crack rock energy, it's like, all right, he sold him this fucking fairy tale. And when that didn't happen, he started to get, these, oh, hey, dude, you're not, if you take Biden, like, we're not going to be interested in publishing you anymore. If you take Biden, we're not going to be interested in having you come and speak next year at X, Y, or Z event. Like, oh, we're going to probably remove you from this board, right? And those are political pressures. Those are financial pressures. Those are the kind of things that you should anticipate occurring before you launch this kind of an effort, before you do run for president. But I think it kind of comes back to the fact that it was all, partially baked. I think half baked would be generous to say on Dr. West's part. And so if Ryan's right, I think that that's why in all reality, I think it's just more of the fact that he thought there was going to be a lot of fanfare and a lot of demand for him, and that he was going to be met by adulation and cheers. And at the end of the day, it landed with a thud because the establishment didn't want to recognize it, and he didn't have the organization behind him to, force it to with grassroots momentum. Like, people think, and we talk about this all the time, we're spoiled and we're delusional because we all feel like the Bernie Sanders thing happened out of nowhere, right? But that's not true. It was meticulously coordinated. Bernie Sanders knew exactly how to plan a grassroots movement. He'd been doing it since the 1960s, guys, back when that shit was super effective. I mean, and you read about it in Fear and Loathing 72, which I always bring when I'm on vacation, right? They talk about the people in Wisconsin and how well they organized it for McGovern, Gavin, and it all came back to this like 124-year-old kid who Hunter Thompson talks about how he looks like he slept one wink in the last 18 months, because he's like been so stressed to the gills and all that shit, because that's what it takes to run a campaign. And it didn't have that effort behind it. I think that, Cornel West smart as he is, he got conned by a crackhead named Nick Branna, who's done a lot of conning around town. The dude has a resume that looks legitimate. He's got money from his old man, so he can make it look like a big show. And then you only have jackasses like me and Gavin being like, Dr. West, no! And finally he listens to not us, but people who were saying exactly what the fuck we were saying all along. I just think he got out of his control and he didn't really know what to do. And now he's the inmates are running the asylum. I think it's more about who his campaign advisors are than, Dr. West at this point.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. It's also ironic and, kind of unfortunate because I do think that Cornel West would have been a lot more successful at potentially reigniting the Bernie excitement, energy, and movement if he had just run as a Democrat. I don't think that Bernie Sanders would have ignited the movement that he ignited if he had started off running as a People's Party candidate and then jumped to the Green Party. You know what I'm saying? There's already a massive percentage of voters who don't take third parties seriously, period. But Dr. West being even more unserious objectively than your average third party candidate, that absolutely undercut any potential movement that he could build. And while I'm definitely a third party supporter and I like the idea of a third party revolution, I do just objectively think it's true that Cornel West would have attracted way more support if he had challenged Biden in the Democratic primary. Then, of course, he could have done the dirty break and, still run as a third party candidate if he felt that was necessary, if he felt like the process was unfair. But I think that would have been the obvious way to go, following the footsteps of Bernie Sanders in that way. And I do believe he would have been greeted with a lot more enthusiasm simply because people would have taken it seriously. People did not take it seriously when he declared his candidacy as not only a third party candidate, but a candidate with the least serious third party in history, that being the People's Party, of course.
Hey, now I might be, if I win this, I will be on ballots, and then I might throw the election to Trump. So then he's like, I'm going to run as an independent. And running as an independent, I think he's only on 3 ballots at this point. Running as an independent, it's very difficult to get on the ballot. He's raised less than $1 million. Right. And he doesn't seem to have the energy to kind of get on the ballot in 50 states. And is that deliberate? Is that an expression of his, oh, wait a minute. Because he is very clear that he believes that Trump is a more dangerous form of fascism than Biden's form of fascism. That is, and he has
had a lovely place in American politics. They're like, no. This guy's running for president, but he really believes that one brand of fascism he's opposing is the clearly more dangerous form of fascism, though on principle, of course, he opposes fascism in all forms, which is why he's been compelled to run. It's like, wow, we sure live in a great country. This is the best country on earth. No wonder they told me that over and over and over again when I was a kid, so I wouldn't start asking any questions about it on my own.
With that position, but that is his position. And if that is your position,
then what's your raison d'etre? What are we doing here?
And I think what he's doing here is not running.
Oh, well, I like the psychoanalysis. Maybe that's why I won't come on the show. He doesn't want a big enough program. All right.
Hey, guys.
That's pretty funny. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely possible. Again, the only reason why I kind of disagree, it's a lot of work to be running for president. And you're also subjecting yourself to just a massive amount of scrutiny, as we've found out directly as a result of the Cornel West campaign. Now we know about the IRS money that Zac was just referencing, that, what was it, $500,000 that Dr. West owes to the IRS? No one knew about that before he ran for president. No one knew about
it was something wild that would make me vomit. I would never be able to pay that amount of money back.
Yeah, exactly. We wouldn't know about that. There's a lot of embarrassing stuff. I think it came out that he had some missed child support payments. I don't even know. It's messy when you run for president.
Weird statement, right, guys, where he's like, I don't want to take any questions about my family. I want to give my children the world, like all parents. And I'm like, you're running for president, sir. Your finances are going to be under scrutiny. I don't know if you watched the Donald Trump campaign go down.
Yeah.
But we all collectively decided as a society that we want to see people's tax records when they run for president.